Now in this section, we're going to get into one of my favorite topics of Microsoft Azure, which is virtual machines. Now, as you know, we can create both Windows and Linux virtual machines hosted in Azure. I'm going to start off by creating a Windows Server virtual machine. Now, in the last few months, Microsoft has changed the interface for creating a new virtual machine. So seeing this, you might be unfamiliar if you haven't created a virtual machine in a little while. This actually gives me more, it reminds me of the AWS method of creating virtual machines, the way that these tabs are set up. But that's that. Going to create a virtual machine, the first thing you need to do is choose your subscription and choose your resource group. Got to give the virtual machine a name, AZ, new VM. There's the rules that pop up, cannot contain non-ASCII characters, must be unique for the resource group, and only 1 to 15 characters long. Now, the region that you choose the virtual machine on, all regions of Azure support virtual machines, but there's different support for availability depending on the region you choose. So I'm going to choose Central US because I'm going to show you availability zones in a little bit. If I was to choose East US, it does not have the availability zone feature. So Azure New VM in the Central US, availability options. Now, right off the bat, we can see that we can set this up into an availability set, or we can set this up into an availability zone. I'm not going to touch that for now, but when we get into talking about availability, we're going to have to readdress this. The image, we get a second chance to change our mind in terms of which type of operating system we're going to install. Everything from Windows 10, Windows Server 2008, 12, 16, and 4 different flavors of Linux. So I'm going to keep 2016. Now, this little box here is where we get to choose our instance type. Okay, so if I said change size, we get up the dozens and dozens of options that we have for creating instances. Now, there are also filters on here. So right now it says size small, generation current, general purpose, premium. We can basically, there are 150 VM sizes, and we can basically filter down what we need. Let's say add filter, and we're going to want something that has between 1 and 4 CPUs. 1. Oh, this is a slider. 1 and 4 CPUs. Okay. So now we're showing 12 options for virtual machines. Now, when I'm working in a development space, I usually go into the B instance family. Right? B instance family is sort of it's the general purpose virtual machine, but it's really underpowered when it comes to RAM. Okay, for a 1 CPU VM, you get 1 gigabyte of RAM. If you were to go into the D series, especially DS series down here, we can get a 1 CPU machine, but it comes with 3.5 gigabytes of RAM. So this is more of a production style server. If you were to do a 1 CPU server, this is more of a development and testing type server. So I'm going to choose B1MS. That contains 1 CPU but 2 gigabytes of RAM and twice the throughput in terms of operations per second. So B1MS. This is the usual question of creating a user. Create a user ID and password. Now we're going to get a couple of chances here to talk about the ports. By default, no inbound ports are enabled. It used to be Microsoft did enable the RDP port by default, but even now it doesn't do that anymore. You have to go into here and select, if you want to be able to Windows Remote Desktop into here, you have to open up port 3389. If you intend to use this as a web server, you have to open up the HTTP ports. If this is a Linux machine and you want to SSH into it, there's a port for that too. Now don't forget that you can save money. If you have an enterprise license for Windows and you are able to use one of your licenses for your cloud servers, then you can use hybrid benefit and the cost of this server would drop pretty dramatically. When you create a virtual machine, you do have the option of having additional disks. So it comes with, let's go back here. It comes with 4 gigabytes of temporary storage, which is on the machine's operating system disk. But if you want to have a lot more storage, you're going to have to set up a separate disk. So you attach a disk, and each of these disks have prices associated with it. It's going to create a brand new network by default. We're not going to talk about networking at this point, but we could create a VNet or attach it to an existing VNet. Have basic or advanced network security groups. Remember, we already chose the inbound ports, and so this is the second opportunity for us to set which ports are open. We can always go back and change this. And accelerated networking, basically this VM size does not support it, but accelerated networking is the ability for 2 machines running on the same network to be able to talk to each other at a much faster pace than if it uses standard networking. And again, only certain VM types have that, but basically it bypasses the normal Microsoft networking setup where the traffic has to go out to the virtual network and then go back through a network interface hop back into the server. So a lot less hops if you have accelerated networking. The diagnostic settings. So do we want a diagnostics to be set on for this machine? Do we want to set up as a system managed identity so that it can run? We can use role-based access control to manage the permissions of this thing. I always like to use auto shutdown. So I'm going to choose my region, which is -4, I believe, -5 now. And I'm going to say 5 p.m. this machine's going to shut down. And we talked about backups. We can turn on Azure backups right within this configuration. We don't need to worry about virtual machine extensions at this point. Tagging, we talked about this is very important for costs. And so if we wanted to put environment dev, for instance, as a tag, it will tag all resources with that. Next, we get this lovely summary that will tell us we're going to be paying 3.6 cents per hour for this virtual machine, and we basically then agree to that. And now it's going to go off and do that. Now, because it has to create networks, storage, the virtual machine itself, IP address, etc., this is going to take a bunch of minutes. And so this deployment underway, you can see that it's going to basically be real time. It's going to tell us about which resources are being created and when they are, and we can see the status of this. So I'm going to pause this. We'll come back when the virtual machine is up. All right, so our virtual machine was created in 4 minutes 35 seconds. I really do like this deployment screen here. It tells you everything that you need to know, all the resources that were created. So we can just go to the resource to see it. Now the auto shutdown time has passed, and so I'm going to have to start it up again in order to be able to do anything with it. But we can see here that we have a virtual machine. It's in our resource group running in Central US. It is a Windows machine running on our B1MS instance, which is a fairly cheap instance that's not going to cost us too much if we leave it running by mistake. We set up the tagging. The tagging was automatically applied, and we can see some basic stuff here. Now, before we get into it, I want to talk about availability as one of the major topics of this test. But just to remind you that by clicking on the connect link here for the virtual machine, we get 2 options for either RDP or SSH to connect to the machine. This is a Windows machine, so we're going to connect using RDP. Remember, we allowed the We allowed the port number 3389 to be public, and so that should be okay. Now this is choosing a private IP address. That's not certainly going to be helpful for us from connecting from our personal computers, but yeah, SSH also is available for connecting. So if we ever want to connect to this, we can do that. The public IP address is here. So in this case, it's 168.61. We can RDP into that, and we should be able to see that. Let's do that. Accept the certificate. And this machine is fairly low powered. Remember, we're dealing with a B1MS machine, and so everything's going to be a lot slower. But we can see we've been able to connect. We're in a Windows Remote Desktop session to that IP address. And Windows is now setting our desktop up for the first time usage. So we were able to successfully connect to this machine from our home computers. That means that port 3389 is open through the firewall. Okay, if we were not able to connect to it, we would have to look at 2 or 3 different places to see where the connection is failing. Okay, I'm not going to allow network sharing, etc. So we have successfully been able to log into this machine. Let's stop this now, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about high availability next.